Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Tech Exec Mentor channel, where we go through tools and techniques to help technology professionals along their leadership journey. I am Sam, a tech industry executive based in New York. I'm a trainer, published author, and mentor. And in this video, I'm going to go through the second part of the 20-year career planning tool covered in my previous video. If you haven't seen that video, no worries. I will go through a brief explanation of the tool, walk through the template, which you can download from my website, and cover an example of an analyst lead who's interested in moving into leadership. Then, to wrap things up, I will cover some steps on how you can use this tool throughout the year to help you make career related decisions. For an in depth explanation of the tool and how it can help you plan out and prioritize your goals, be sure to check out my first video, linked in the description below. And as always, if you like my content, be sure to subscribe to access more. So after mentoring and teaching hundreds of high potential software and technology industry professionals, one of the most common questions that I get is, "Hey Sam, a new opportunity opened up at work. Should I take it?" Or, "I've received a couple of competing job offers. Which one do I take?" I mean, that sounds fantastic, right? But honestly, I get it. It's a stressful situation. If you're a high potential individual and moving up in your career, it's very likely that you will encounter such crossroads with increasing frequency. Wouldn't it be great if there was a tool you could consult at times like this? So, where the 20-year plan comes in, it's a tool that helps you define all of the things that are meaningful to you over the span of your career. And then it helps to break out the goals into manageable chunks in 5-year blocks. It includes many aspects of your professional life, including how much money you will be earning, key achievements or accomplishments, your job titles, but it also includes other aspects of your life, such as your personal and family life. Then finally, it takes into account the timing of everything so that you understand what aspects of your life you will need to focus on more at the various stages of your career. Sounds interesting? Let's dive right in. And so now we have the 20-year career planning tool template, which is a document that I've prepared for you. You can find the links to download this document on my website. It's also linked in my YouTube videos. One of the couple of things that we're going to do is I'm going to walk through the document, talk about some of the various fields that we should be looking to complete. And again, just a bit of perspective before we go into this, the 20-year career planning tool is something that I've used to great effect. Myself, personally, I use this tool for my career, and I've also used this tool with a number of my mentees, and it's definitely been a very effective tool in figuring out where your future career plans are, your goals, and how you're going to achieve them. So let's dive right in. So the first thing you want to do is actually take a look at the template on the first page. We have some instructions. There's a couple of guiding questions that will help you to frame your responses in the next couple of pages. Ultimately, you want to take a look at a couple of sections for each 5-year block of your career. There's a section on your career, there's a section on your personal life, and something about your significant relationships. And again, as I go into these questions, I want you to think about the concept of layering. It's rare to actually sit down and complete everything in one session. You want to fill in, walk away, go back to work, go back to your life, come back a couple of weeks later, add in a bit more detail, and this is very much an iterative process. So let's take a look. I'm going to actually scroll down, take a look at the instructions on your free time, and we're actually diving in. First of all, we start with 20 years. So the question a lot of people ask is, why do we start so far into the future? What I've noticed is that for most folks, it's hard to predict, especially what your aspirations are very close into the future. There are a lot of factors in play. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of options available. And so it's hard to put something definitive down. But for most folks, the tendency is, as you look further afield into your personal life, your career, there's certain key aspects of things that you'd like to accomplish. And so those tend not to shift too much. You know, you think about the concept of a bucket list, something that you can actually look at down the road, and these are key accomplishments that I wanted to achieve in my life. But it's very much the same kind of concept. So first of all, what we like to do is we like to fill in, what is your age at that point, 20 years into the future, the part of the world you're living in. I think that's quite critical as well. It kind of sets the frame for all the information. And the first section here is your professional life. So, what do you expect to be working in? What would your job title be? What would some of the key responsibilities be in that particular role? Will you be an executive? Will you be a senior manager? Will you be owning your own business or several businesses? What would that look like? What is the industry that you plan to be in? Is it going to be a similar industry, or are you looking to pivot at that point? So, what does the end point look like 20 years down the road? And again, to get to that point, to get to that role, to get to that industry and that kind of company, what are some of the skills? Maybe there are certain key experiences, things that you need to have done, accomplished along the way to get to that point. And also, very important, is there a number in terms of your compensation? How much do you expect to be making at that point? Is there a number? Is there something that will make you happy, that you feel is worthwhile for all the work that you've done? And then we tie back into your personal life. Are there activities that you are engaging in? Maybe you're volunteering. Maybe you're working on sporting activities. Maybe you're on a board. What is the level of involvement? And more importantly, what level of expertise do you need to be in that particular situation, right? If you're teaching or you're volunteering or you're advising, maybe you're sitting on a board, there may be prerequisite courses, credentials, or maybe you need to rack up a certain number of hours. What does that look like? What is the commitment that you need to put in to be at that level? I think most importantly, what is your level of fitness, right? We all like to say that, hey, we hope that we can be fit, but if you have a specific goal, something that you want to accomplish, like for example, running a marathon, is that realistic? Can you run a marathon at that age if you are not fit? So what does the level of fitness look like, right? Don't just put in fit, but it could be, a certain number of activities. It could be a weight goal. It could be a dietary goal. It could be biometric goals. What is your blood pressure? What is your blood sugar? Getting specific really helps. And family life, right? Let's not try to build out our personal goals in a vacuum, right? Are you in a relationship 20 years into the future? Do you have dependence? So maybe you have kids 20 years from now. Maybe you have kids already, or you're planning on having kids. How old would they be 20 years into the future? Will they be fully grown? Will they be teenagers or maybe younger children? What is the level of effort? How much time do you need to put in? Is there a financial commitment? And of course, your elder relatives, maybe your parents 20 years into the future, how old are they? Maybe you have an older relative like an aunt or your grandparents. How old will they be 20 years into the future? Will they need help or support? Do you need to be there? Do you need to give them time? And sometimes, maybe you need to think about financially as well. Like when my dad was sick, he was going in and out of care for a number of years. And, there was quite a significant financial burden on the family. So, what could that potentially look like? I think that's all information that you want to collect, right, and put down. Now, this is the 20 years, and you'll notice as we scroll through and you get to the next page, that's 15 years. Same set of questions, right? It's broken into professional, personal, and family. The difference now is how do you look to, is there a trajectory that you need to be on? If you go back to the prior page, 20 years into the future, there were certain goals, certain aspirations, a job title, or something in your personal life that you wanted to achieve. This is 5 years before that. Were there certain key experiences that you needed, right, to get to that endpoint in 20 years? So this is almost like reverse engineering. It's you're working your way backwards. You're looking at a 20-year endpoint, and 5 years away from that 20-year endpoint, 15 years in future from today, where do you need to be? So that's a great way to look at it. If you have kids 20 years into the future, they're going to be younger, right? 15 years into the future. What level of dependency do they have? Are they in school? Are there commitments as a parent that you need to make? Do you need help? These are all important questions that you need to answer as well. And so you'll see this repeating itself. You're going 15, 10 years, and finally 5. And I'm going to spare you going through every single page because essentially it's the same set of questions. The key here, again, is you want to think about how you're going to break through, looking at where you want to be 20 years, projecting that 20 years, and again, as vivid a picture as you can build, and then working backwards, right, in 5-year increments, 5, 10, 15, 20. Are there certain key things that you need to do? Now, again, the main takeaway going through this exercise is that it's going to tell you that there's certain things, hopefully as you go through this, and usually this is something that I help a lot of my mentees with, but you can do it on your own as you start building out that 20 years and you work backwards, you'll see there's a timing for something. There's a sequencing. Some things need you to go back in time. You need to basically look at, well, if you need to, for example, go back to school to do a master's degree, or maybe you want to do a PhD, that takes a couple of years. If you want to start a business, that takes a couple of years. If you want to put something into an investment, you want to launch your own startup, that takes a certain number of years, right? There's a certain level of energy, financial commitments to go into those, achieving those goals. So that's critical for you to look at it from that perspective and work your way back. You're going to realize that there's certain cutoff dates then that you're going to need to hold yourself to. If you need to attain a certain goal by the time you hit 20 years or 15 or 10 years, then there's a period of time before that that you need to start working on. And that's the value of this tool. Now, I'm going to get into another document that's an illustrative example. This is taken from someone that I've worked with in the past. For the sake of privacy, I've chosen to change her name, so we'll call her Alice. Alice worked with me a couple of years ago, and she comes from a very strong technical background. She worked in consulting, very much focused, specialized skill set. She's been promoted several times. Currently, she's at a crossroads. She's quite interested in moving into an executive career path. She's seriously investigated options going back to school. She also has recently gotten engaged. Current focus is very much on career progression, but Alice is definitely interested in starting a family at some point in the next couple of years. On the personal front, Alice is very much involved in yoga. It's become a strong part of her identity at some point in her career, pursuing trainer accreditation. It's a big part of priority for Alice. And finally, a bit of information about her family, her parents. Married a bit later in life. Her parents are just retiring, and so there are aspects of the next 20 years where her parents are going to be aging significantly, and that's going to factor quite a bit into the plan. So, starting with 20 years, at this point, Alice is going to be 48, and she hopes to be working in a major city. She hopes to reach, we kind of say, the pinnacle or a key milestone in her career. She wants to be a senior executive, ideally a chief digital officer, and also, assuming she has accumulated significant professional expertise over the last 20 years, professional experience, she wants to also be in a position to advise and hopefully either invest as an angel investor or through a broader fund. In terms of the type of company and industry, Alice was quite interested in looking at potentially moving out of consulting into a corporate gig, corporate role, working for a company either funded by a private equity or venture capital firm, or potentially working in an investment role, potentially, or a senior operating role in one of those portfolio firms. Looking at experience, Alice would imagine that she wanted to get some solid management, leadership strategy expertise under her belt, and also staying technical about comp. She looked at a couple of remuneration studies and saw that something she would like would be ideally making up to 7 figures a year. We talked about the composition, and she agreed that a lot of that would be more on stock, performance options. A couple of things 20 years into the future. As I mentioned, Alice was very interested in making yoga a bigger part of her life. She assumed that if she went through raising kids 20 years into the future, hopefully they would be older, maybe not entirely off to college yet, but certainly a bit more independent. And so she would want to invest time in traveling and hopefully going to a number of retreats every year, yoga retreats, in terms of maintaining her yoga trainer accreditation and whatever requirements there were, and also teaching yoga on weekends. It was a big focal point for her health and this holistic health and balance in her life. Looking at family life, married at that point, and obviously raising a family and kids, certainly older. Parents would be much older, and so thinking about financial needs for her children, her parents, and needing a bit more help. So that's the end state, right? So that's something about where she felt that 20 years into the future, she'd be very happy looking at that future state. So the next couple of pages really focus on how you get there, and working backwards from 20 years, right? The next step is 15 years. You see that she's 43 years old. And so now you can start thinking, if she is 20 years into the future in a transformation executive role, then she would need to accumulate significant experience, either in a senior a vice president kind of role, leadership role, executive role, and what would be necessary to do that. We talked about beyond getting all the necessary credentials, right, like the MBA, it's really about getting the portfolio of work, right? So what did it mean to really be in that senior role? And she felt that definitely having multiple roles, multiple functions, mostly starting with the technology side, sticking with technology companies, and then additional skills, right, to get to that point, maybe building up on some coaching of her own, right, mentoring, building up leaders. And as you can see, the comp, she felt at that point wasn't that big of a deal. It was really more, something that would make sense as she moved up, right, like into a VP or SVP role in a technology firm. At the age of 43, right, which is 15 years into the future, she would expect to be quite heavily involved in her children's life. Her children would probably be in middle school at that point. So again, not fully independent, but certainly something that she would want to at least focus on getting her yoga instructor accreditations at that point. She felt trying to force it earlier, either at the 10 or 5 year mark, would be fairly tough. Also, because at some point she would have very small kids and there were annual accreditation requirements to maintain a cert that she felt would be really hard and put undue stress. So for her, she was actually happy to push it off and not necessarily give herself a lot of pressure until she was able to get a bit more balance in her life, which was actually a pretty cool insight that she developed. And a couple more things also, as you can see, being in a relationship, right, raising two kids, parents definitely becoming a bit older. She felt as long as her parents maintained a good, decent state of health, she could still focus a lot more on her career and the children, which made sense. Now, going to 10 years, as you can see, late 30s, having a mid or senior level leadership role, Alice thought about, well, would she stay in consulting? Would she stay in industry? Would she pivot out to a corporate role? That certainly was a bit more of a crossroads situation 10 years down the road. She also felt at this point, well, it was very tough. If she had young kids, then the question would be, would that make sense to go back to school? And it is a tough decision. I personally went back to school and did an executive MBA. And at the time I did that, the average age of my class was 34. And so I had a lot of classmates who actually already had kids or were about to have kids or were in the midst of rearing very young kids. So it is a common situation. And certainly, if the opportunity presented itself, she could also do that earlier or sooner. But this definitely was a bit of a cutoff decision where in 10 years, that was just something she needed to do because beyond that, it would provide decreasing returns. And again, as you can see, pay wise, a decent pay, but certainly not a major significant factor for her. It was really more about getting experience and positioning herself for the more senior roles. And so Alice was content to play more like a long game. Looking at all the things that she was trying to accomplish, she really felt that her schedule would be dominated by raising kids. Daily yoga practice was a big thing, just to maintain a practice, to maintain her own fitness and well-being, and make that a priority amongst all the other crazy things in your life. And one thing she realized also was, given that her husband, who at this point her fiance hadn't gone through this kind of exercise, it probably made sense to start talking through this plan to try to figure out, well, if she was planning to go back to school at this point with very young kids, one or more children, then would they need help? If she was traveling, going into classes, working, how would that look for her? Would they need additional help? Would they need to get a nanny? Could they rely on help from their parents or in-laws? Important things to factor in as you look at working back from the 20 to the 15 to 10. And that's the perspective that you build. You start realizing at some point to accomplish things, the time that you commit to get to those accomplishments, that starts becoming a decision point for you. Do you do it now? What else do you sacrifice to get to this point? And it's not that you necessarily follow it to a T, but it helps you understand the universe of factors that you got to consider. So finally, getting into the 5 year, and she felt, yeah, certainly going to do that MBA, but more importantly, actually really getting those technical skills, trying to build a brand as a technical leader, networking more, getting a decent salary while she could before there were kids potentially, but maybe getting a bit of travel in. So enjoying a bit of that social life, that newly married life while she could. So there you go. Looking back at the plan, this didn't happen overnight. Alice didn't create this in one sitting. It was built over weeks. And there was a bit of reflection, introspection involved to kind of get to the point of, I see, okay, here's a decision point that I should be making. Well, I hope that this overview gave you a sense of how the 20-year plan can help you plan out your key achievements and milestones across your career. Remember, the tool works best if you can block out time to fill out all aspects of your life, not just the professional parts, but your professional and personal and family life as well. Then you want to go back over time and add in details that you might have missed or update the plan as your priorities and goals change. Remember, the more vivid a picture of your future that you can paint, the more likely it is that you can plot out a pathway to achieving these goals. Now, if you like this video, please remember to subscribe to the channel. I'm making a point of posting new videos frequently with tips and tools on how to progress your career into leadership in the technology industry. Please leave a comment if you liked this video or had a question about how to use it. This is Sam from Tech Exec Mentor signing off.